Srila Prabhupada Lilamrta Volume 6, Uniting Two Worlds, Around the World / Return to Vrindavan, 1975 to 1977. A biography of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, by Satsvarup Das Goswami. Chapter 5, India, Unifying ISKCON. During 1975, Srila Prabhupada increasingly referred management problems to the GBC, specifically to the annual GBC meeting in Mayapur. From the beginning of ISKCON, he had been saying, "It is not one man's work." He had created the governing body commission to relieve himself of the staggering burden of personally managing his growing world organization. "Always remember," he had written to a GBC member, "that you are one of the few leaders I have given this responsibility to, and your task is very great." Prabhupada saw the progress of his movement as a wonderfully successful phenomenon, proof of the direct mercy of Lord Chaitanya upon his humble efforts. ISKCON was his service to his Guru Maharaj, and now his disciples should maintain it and increase it as their service to their spiritual master. He said he wanted to see 108 flourishing temples before his departure from the world. Keeping those temples alive was to be the work of his sincere followers. He wrote to his GBC representative for Australia, quote, "All temples in Melbourne, London, Paris, Bombay, all are very nice. Everything is very bright and brilliant. The deity is proof of the sincere service. It is the duty of the GBC now to maintain this. Their duty is to enthuse them and maintain," unquote. Problems were inevitable for a preacher of Krishna consciousness. Many sadhus, therefore, preferred to remain in a holy place without preaching. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and the great acharyas in the sampradaya of Lord Chaitanya had been concerned with offering the Lord's devotional service to as many conditioned souls as possible. Yet, to take up this path, one would have to be tolerant. Financial needs, national and local governmental restrictions, ignorant and demoniac enemies of pure devotion to the Lord, envy, personal ambition, and disagreements among neophyte devotees, struggles and fall-downs in the attempt to avoid illicit sex and intoxication. All these and many more problems complicated the preacher's mission. Srila Prabhupada, however, knew the struggle was worth it, even to save just one soul from the cycle of birth and death. Prabhupada wanted his more advanced disciples to share the struggle with him, and when he saw competence and sincerity in some of his senior members, he tried to turn affairs over to them and concentrate more on his life's mission of presenting all 12 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam. Always the devotees were enthusiastically pressing Prabhupada to translate and write more books, so that they could read them and distribute them. Srila Prabhupada replied that he was trying his best, but that the task was not mechanical. Great concentration and peace of mind were required. He could not write while at the same time being besieged by dozens of threatening, complicated issues. When the GBC member responsible for Gurukul wrote Srila Prabhupada with a plan that all ISKCON centers should support the educational system, Prabhupada replied, "As far as taxing the centers for the maintenance, that should be considered amongst the GBC." When a controversy arose in the Stockholm Center and devotees appealed to Prabhupada for a judgment, he replied, "This must be considered at a full meeting of the GBC." And he added, "All of our students will have to become guru, but they are not qualified." Srila Prabhupada said that sexual attraction, making unnecessary changes, and fighting among godbrothers were all Western diseases. Krishna consciousness was the path of perfection, and if his disciples stayed persistently and sincerely on the path, they could certainly succeed. Sometimes, however, Prabhupada saw the Western diseases overcoming his disciples, and even the GBC members would seem unable to stop it. Yet, unless they spared him from such headaches, how could he do the higher work? GBC, he said, must mean that by his managing there are not any complaints, so that I can be relieved to do the translation work. He had expounded on this principle in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Quote, when the disciples are grown up and are able to preach, the spiritual master should retire and sit down in a solitary place to write and execute Nirjan Bhajan. This means sitting silently in a solitary place and executing devotional service. Ellipses. The devotees of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness now render service as preachers in various parts of the world. Now they can allow their spiritual master to retire from active preaching work. In the last stage of the spiritual master's life, the devotees of the spiritual master should take preaching activities into their own hands. Unquote. But it was like trying to control the wind. When the difficulties mounted, the devotees would run to him like children running to their father. Sometimes a disciple would simultaneously ask him to write his books and then drop a serious problem in his lap. One of the leaders in America reported to him that some devotees were not following the principles, but that Srila Prabhupada should please stay in India and continue writing peacefully. Prabhupada wrote back, quote, if the old habits come back, then everything is finished. If my mind becomes disturbed in this way, then how can I concentrate on book writing? It is not possible. Better not inform me anything, and let me sit in Vrindavan. Unquote. Better not inform me anything, and let me sit in Vrindavan. Unquote. Sometimes Srila Prabhupada uttered the phrase, let me sit in Vrindavan, as if to give up managing the whole problematic society. Everyone knew he would never leave ISKCON. He had already sacrificed his life to save the world by leading the Krishna consciousness movement. But when would his disciples mature? Srila Prabhupada wrote, I want that the GBC relieve me of all management, which means they have to manage the way I manage. And often he would say, do as I am doing. When controversies and disagreements among the GBC secretaries themselves came before him, he would refer them to the GBC body. Quote, I appointed GBC for peaceful management of affairs, and now you are creating disturbances among yourselves. So how can I be peaceful to translate my work? So all these things should be kept in abeyance for the time being, and when we meet in Mayapur, we can discuss amongst the entire GBC. The spiritual sky questions and all other questions of this nature will simply have to wait until we discuss it in Mayapur. Unquote. Srila Prabhupada continued to hold the GBC responsible for settling the affairs of ISKCON. For better or worse, he wanted all his disciples to accept the GBC as their authority, and he trusted that when the GBC members all met together, working under his guidance, they could solve the problems. But whether they could actually spare him, allowing him to peacefully write his books, seemed doubtful. During 1975, a controversy arose among some of the ISKCON members, including some of the GBC members, as to whether Grihasta devotees, married men, could actually be spiritual leaders in ISKCON. Although the Krishna consciousness philosophy clearly explained that any devotee, regardless of his ashram, could become qualified and purified, the controversy grew. In September, a sannyasi GBC member flew from the U.S. to Vrindavan just to suggest to Prabhupada that another GBC member, a Grihasta, was not qualified to lead. Srila Prabhupada, however, said the matter could be settled at the annual GBC meeting. But when, the next day, a letter came from Rameshwar supplicating Prabhupada to continue his translating work, Prabhupada replied that he was prepared to work at his writing, but that when one leader flies 10,000 miles to lodge a complaint against another, then what can I do? Quote, if you all leaders cannot work together, then how can you expect the others to cooperate with you? Differences may be there, but still you have to cooperate together. Otherwise, where is the question of my being relieved of so many problems and decisions? Unquote. As the third annual International Festival approached, the long-standing problems of various discontented parties awaited settlement in the court of the GBC. Srila Prabhupada would be arriving in Mayapur on January 17th, almost 2 months before the GBC meetings and the gathering of devotees. With perhaps 1,000 devotees attending, there would be blissful kirtans, classes, and parikrams. And there would be problems. Prabhupada made it clear that the proper way of settling the controversies was not by gossiping about them, not by pressing him for a ruling, but by trusting in the GBC. Prabhupada himself would stand by the decisions of the GBC or, if necessary, correct them, and so sincere followers should also not hesitate to follow. Quote, at the Mayapur meeting, whatever we have decided, that is good for 1 year. So, if anything has to be done, it will be decided by majority decision of the GBC. I do not wish to give any decision without the GBC's verdict. My only grievance is that I appoint GBC to give me relief from the management, but on the contrary, complaints and counter-complaints are coming to me. Then how my brain can be peaceful? So, best thing is that we wait for the Mayapur meeting and decide there, combinedly, what to do. If there are any discrepancies, that will be discussed at the GBC meeting in Mayapur. How can one man manage the whole world affairs? Unquote. January 17th, 1976. En route from Calcutta to Mayapur, Prabhupada stopped at the mango grove and took breakfast. Fruit, bada, nuts, and sweets. Even before reaching Mayapur, he was enjoying the peaceful atmosphere of the Bengal countryside. Soon he would be at the Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir, his special place of worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. More than 50 adult devotees and 30 young Bengali Gurukul boys were waiting for Srila Prabhupada at the gate. For the first time, Prabhupada beheld the large entrance dome recently built over the gate. A thick 20-foot flower garland stretched across the gateway, and before it stood Bhavananda Goswami, holding a small silk cushion on which rested a pair of scissors. Stepping out of the car into the bright sunlight, Prabhupada took the scissors and cut the garland, sanctifying the gate. Prabhupada smiled. Everyone cheered as the gate swung open and Prabhupada entered, followed by the ecstatic kirtan party. As Prabhupada walked toward the temple of Radha Madhava, everywhere he looked he saw blossoming flowers. Clay pots of burning frankincense billowed fragrant smoke, and women stood on the second floor veranda, offering showers of rose petals as Prabhupada approached. The main building was decorated beautifully. Walking beneath an orange silk umbrella amid the devotees and exuberant kirtan of the holy name, he appeared regal and triumphant. Inside the temple, where dozens of garlands hung from the ceiling, Prabhupada came before the golden forms of Radha Madhava and offered prostrated obeisances. He felt he was in Vaikuntha. Because of the arrangements the devotees had made, he said, Krishna was smiling. Later that day, as Prabhupada was taking his massage, his servant Harisori suggested that this would be a good place for retirement. Either Vrindavan or Mayapur, Prabhupada replied. No other place, that is sure. In the afternoon, Prabhupada inspected the grounds and buildings. He was pleased at the spaciousness of the prasadam hall, built to seat 1,200, and he remarked that its size reminded him of the Bombay railway station. But when he found the steps to the kitchen dirty, he criticized strongly. One of the devotees explained that it was usually cleaned, but that the devotee who always did it was chanting his japa. "You are chanting japa," said Prabhupada, "and it has not been cleaned for 300 years. Clean first, then japa." Under the plea of japa, they are simply dozing. He said that to anyone who finds a situation affected by the mode of ignorance but doesn't act to correct it is also being affected by the mode of ignorance. He said that anyone who finds a situation affected by the mode of ignorance but doesn't act to correct it is also being affected by the mode of ignorance. Srila Prabhupada walked down to the bank of the Jalangi to see the boat the devotees were using for traveling from village to village. On board, he praised the simple life of traveling and preaching. He also went to the Goshala, and saw the calves and cows, and he drank a cup of the first sugarcane juice of the season from cane grown on the ISKCON land. As Srila Prabhupada walked through the fields to the proposed site of the Mayapur city, Sarabi described where various buildings could be located. Prabhupada suggested they present their plan to West Bengal government officials and ask them to provide the necessary land. Srila Prabhupada continued to meditate on the Mayapur city, and a few days later he composed a letter to the Chief Secretary of West Bengal asking for help in acquiring land. ISKCON should not be misunderstood as a sectarian religious institution. He informed the Chief Secretary. Krishna's instructions in Bhagavad Gita, beginning with "We are not the body," were scientific, and thus did not belong to any particular religion. Prabhupada also asserted that ISKCON programs, especially the one contemplated for Mayapur, would solve national and international problems through spiritual education. He mentioned features that would be particularly appealing to the Chief Secretary, such as the investment of foreign capital in the project, the flow of tourists who would come to Mayapur, and the hiring of thousands of local workers for constructing and maintaining the city. His description of the project was fascinating. Quote, "Centered around a cultural exposition building, the total village communal development will unfold. This central exposition building is the first phase of a many-phased plan. It will feature the world's largest planetarium entitled the Temple of Understanding. This structure will be over 30 stories high and will house exhibits depicting all the levels of universal existence and all varieties of living conditions, and all the planetary systems and exact detail through lights, models, dioramas, and murals. There will also be daily scheduled exhibits and tours for the public, and even a moving escalator taking the public to the upper levels of the exhibition building. The planetarium's exhibits on the various levels of existence in this world and beyond will be based on the scientific findings in the Vedic literatures, especially the Srimad Bhagavatam. This temple of understanding shall be surrounded by beautiful pathways, entrances, gardens, and water reservoirs. 4-storied buildings, 1,000 feet long, will stand at the perimeter of the central area on all 4 sides. These will be used for teaching general and specialized branches of education from primary level to postgraduate level." Unquote. In his letter, Srila Prabhupada referred to difficulties in purchasing land for ISKCON's projects, since all the local landowners were escalating their prices far beyond the market value. If the government could make the land available at market prices, then ISKCON could immediately start its important work, officially inaugurating it on the birthday anniversary of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, March 16, 1976. In the meantime, Prabhupada was trying on his own to acquire enough land to begin. The Mayapur city project would require extensive funding and many years of work to develop, but it would proclaim the glories of Lord Chaitanya with unlimited potency. Mayapur would become famous, drawing people from all over the world to see the unique modern application of timeless Vedic wisdom. Prabhupada explained to his disciples that although a sannyasi traditionally does not involve himself with money, the devotee's desire is to unite Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune represented by wealth, with Narayana, God. He said there was truth to the common saying, "No one listens to a poor man." And were he to advertise A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami discoursing in an empty field in Mayapur, no one would come. Westerners especially should be able to hear about Krishna in a comfortable, attractive setting. Prabhupada planned, therefore, that visitors to ISKCON's transcendental city be well accommodated. Gradually, the world would be deeply affected by the dynamic demonstration of the artistic, philosophical, and humanitarian aspects of Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada asked Surabi to draw a master plan for Mayapur city. Staying up all night, Surabi made a preliminary architectural sketch showing specific areas of the city for Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. The sketch also showed temples, schools, streets, walkways, residential buildings, cottages, a stadium, and an airport, as well as self-sufficiency features like windmills, irrigation systems, and agricultural fields. Prabhupada was taking his massage when Surabi brought him the drawing. Prabhupada's golden body was glistening with mustard oil as Hari Sori carefully, strongly massaged his head, back, chest, and limbs. Prabhupada was relaxed and silent, his eyes closed in meditation. But when Surabi entered with the drawing of Mayapur, he became animated. Prabhupada liked the drawing and talked about it for an hour. Now Surabi should make a formal drawing and approach professional architects and appropriate government agencies. The devotees coming to Mayapur should also see it. As fabulous and far-reaching as it was, the Mayapur city should now become a reality. As the festival drew near, some of the sannyasis arrived, hoping to associate more intimately with Srila Prabhupada before the flood of devotees began. A major topic of discussion among the sannyasis was the controversy over the role of grihastha men in ISKCON, and the influence of women and children on the sannyasis and brahmacharis, those in the renounced orders. Some of the sannyasis were suggesting that ISKCON should be more structured to separate the renounced orders and the preachers from the householders. They began airing their views before Srila Prabhupada, who then guided them. On one morning walk, Jayapataka Swami inquired about the standards required before a man could take sannyas. To become sannyasi, Prabhupada replied, the other three processes are there: to become brahmachari, to become grihastha, and to become vanaprastha, stage by stage. But if one is able, he can take sannyas, and that competency is also very simple. If you become fully Krishna conscious, then you can immediately become competent. Brahma bhuyaya kalpate. As soon as you fully engage yourself in Krishna consciousness, then immediately you become more than a sannyasi. Harishori, a grihastha, inquired whether artificially accepting the renounced order could actually be indulging in another form of sense gratification. As soon as we manufacture something, Prabhupada replied, that is sense gratification. When we think, I want to fulfill my desire, that's all. That is sense gratification. It may be that I sit down under a tree or I sit down in a palace. The basic principle is sense gratification. The other day, I was talking about hira chora and kira chora. Hira means diamond and kira means cucumber. One is thinking, I shall steal one cucumber, and another thinks, if I steal, I shall steal a diamond. But the stealing propensity is there. One may think that I am only stealing a cucumber and it is not very dangerous. But in the eyes of the law, both of them are criminal. So if we manufacture a concoction, yes, I have got a stealing propensity, but I'll not steal a diamond. I'll steal Kira. That is only mental concoction, but he is a thief. Jayapataka Swami. So, is Grihasta life in Krishna consciousness allowing us to steal Kira? Prabhupada. Yes, Kira Chora. The prostitute hunter is Hira Chora, and the householder is Kira Chora. That's all. Again, Hari Shodi inquired whether artificial renunciation was sense gratification. There were different views among the disciples, and they wanted Prabhupada to make it very clear so that one party could not take a quote from Prabhupada and claim it was universal. Renunciation is not artificial, said Prabhupada. It is a process. We have to give up this sense gratification. So go through a process to turn. Like sometimes in a health club there is artificial swimming, is it not? Artificial swimming is not actual swimming, but it is to practice. Dayananda. But sometimes people who renounce, they become very proud. What is that? Prabhupada continued to reply that renunciation had to be actually practiced. Everyone must attend the Mangalarti, he said. One must attend this. Otherwise, no prasadam. If you are too sick, then also you should not eat. There should not be sleeping at the time of Mangalarti because he says he's sick, then at the time of prasadam, voracious eating. If the devotees were looking for Prabhupada to make an absolute distinction between Grihasta and Sannyasi, it was not there. He emphasized rather the actual quality and the practice of the individual devotee. On another morning walk, Hridayananda Goswami told Prabhupada of the sannyasis' discussions. Hridayananda. We were thinking that it would be nice to have the city centers for the preachers. And for the women and children, it's much easier to maintain them on our farms. There they can do a little work and produce their own food. Prabhupada. Yes. In the farms, they can live and do some handwork. Guru Kripa Swami. They won't do it though, Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada. Then you don't allow. If they do not follow the rules and regulations, what then is the use? Another sannyasi said that when many householders came together in big communities, an atmosphere of laziness developed, whereas when lots of brahmacharis were preaching together, it was more enlivening. Prabhupada. Anyway, everyone should be engaged, that's all. No idle life. Never encourage laziness. If we maintain some lazy men, then everything will be spoiled. Devotee. I heard, Srila Prabhupada, that you remarked our society is not a love-making society, but these things are going on. Referring to an impropriety of two of his disciples, Prabhupada replied, yes, I have seen in Vrindavan. Other complaints arose. One leader argued that the temple should not have to carry the burden of maintaining women with children but no husbands. Another complaint was that brahmacharis, by selling books, were in effect supporting the householders. Prabhupada continued to reply in a philosophical and practical way that whatever discrepancies were present should be rectified. Sense gratification, laziness, and failure to attend the temple programs should not be tolerated. But this condemnation of malpractices in devotional service did not fall exclusively on any particular group. Shortly after his arrival in Mayapur, Prabhupada had addressed a similar issue in his own correspondence. A Mr. Chatterjee had written from Calcutta to say that he was preaching worship of Lord Chaitanya and was eager to show Srila Prabhupada some articles he had written. Mr. Chatterjee stated, my theme is we can get to see our God Gauranga by taking sannyas. Those who are grihastas reach to the Godhead through Nam Sankirtan. Srila Prabhupada encouraged the man with a reply, quote, "Your theme is okay. There are many devotees of Lord Chaitanya like Advaita Acharya and even Lord Nityananda, who were grihastas. Lord Chaitanya left his grihasta life. It is a matter of understanding Krishna. That is the real qualification. Whether one is grihasta or sannyasi, how well he knows Krishna." Srila Narottam Das Thakur has sung, "Grihe vavane tatake, he goranga bole dake," which means, it doesn't matter whether one is living at home or in the forest, as long as he is chanting the name of Lord Chaitanya, he is a Vaishnava. That was a footnote. Back to the quote. Lord Chaitanya says, "Kiba vipra kiba nyasi, shudra kene naya ye Krishna tattva veta se gurahaya." And the second footnote translates that, whether one is a Brahmin, a sannyasi, or a Shudra, regardless of what he is, he can become a spiritual master if he knows the science of Krishna. Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 8, verse 128. Returning to the quote. "So please, come and we shall discuss your articles," unquote. While sitting relaxed in his room, Srila Prabhupada had his temporary secretary, Dayananda, read him some recent mail. One letter was from a temple president having difficulty managing the devotees, and Prabhupada had Dayananda summarize the letter's points. "He says," said Dayananda, "that the devotees aren't behaving, and so he's criticizing, but they're not accepting." "Simply criticism is not our means," said Prabhupada. "Our means is to show by example." Dayananda made a note of it to use in typing Prabhupada's reply. "Now, Srila Prabhupada," Dayananda continued, "he's inquiring about his household life." "This is not the business of the guru," said Prabhupada. "How to increase sex life and family life. They are not happy, these Western men and women. They become married, but they are not happy. Therefore, I recommend brahmacharya and sannyas life." Several of the devotees were also in the room with Prabhupada, and Jagadguru, a brahmachari, spoke up. "Because they have no training. That's why they have so many problems." "Whatever it may be," said Prabhupada, "but they are not happy. Therefore, I recommend brahmacharya and sannyas." Srila Prabhupada had already been disturbed by what he saw as a loose husband-wife situation in Vrindavan. Now, hearing this letter from a householder who was improperly inquiring about his family life, he again turned his attention to Vrindavan and asked to see his GBC for Vrindavan, Gopal Krishna, who had recently arrived in Mayapur. "It is not a free hotel for lovemaking," Prabhupada began, even before Gopal Krishna entered the room. "Vrindavan is not a joking place. They must be serious for Krishna, and I shall give them everything. Don't worry about money, but manage. There is not scarcity of money. There is scarcity of management. Why so many children in the temple? It is not simply a place for husbandless women. Children should always be engaged, so they shouldn't create a disturbance all over." Srila Prabhupada said that if the mothers were irresponsible and only wanted to take care of their own children, then they should be sent away from Vrindavan. 2 women could run a nursery and take care of many children, and the other women could work. "Not go to the roof and love-making," said Prabhupada, "and make a plan and go away." He stressed that since all India came to Vrindavan, ISKCON Center should be ideal in every respect. Otherwise, people would think that his disciples were hippies and no one would come. A good example of responsible care for children was in Mayapur, where a Gurukul had already been organized. Children are welcome, said Prabhupada, but make them jewels, not spoiled children. Varna Shankar hippies. Varna Sankara hippies. For the sannyasis in Mayapur, Prabhupada's heavy words about irresponsible grihastha life fueled their own arguments. A few of them felt that grihasthas should not even live in the temples. That evening, when the sannyasis gathered in Prabhupada's room, they discussed with him the position of families and children in ISKCON. One sannyasi reported not being allowed to preach in certain temples because he was against marriage and favored brahmachari life. Others complained that expensive properties were being purchased to be used mostly as residences. The preaching was suffering, they said, and brahmacharis were being told to get married if they felt sexually agitated. Prabhupada felt the heavy force of the sannyasis' protest, and he could perceive the antagonism between the ashrams. These things must be decided by the GBC, he said, and no one could go against their decisions. But he also expressed sympathy for what the sannyasis were saying. Families, he suggested, could serve in farm communities and live self-sufficiently in Krishna consciousness. Our whole preaching program is detachment from material life, said Prabhupada, to stop sex life altogether. Grihastha is a concession for those who cannot give it up immediately. Otherwise, marriage is not required. It is simply burdensome. Legal or illegal, the after effects of sex simply mean difficulty. March 7th. The GBC members assembled. The process was to make an agenda, discuss each issue, and then pass resolutions by voting. At the end of the day, they would go to Srila Prabhupada in his room and read the day's resolutions for his approval or amendment. The first day, they spent mostly in assigning zones and duties for each GBC member. They reported these results to Srila Prabhupada, and he approved them. Prabhupada also addressed the issue of grihastha and sannyas life, saying that all the devotees should become attached to Krishna's family, not to the stool family or pig family. Sannyas life meant rejection of the false family, but not the family of Krishna consciousness. The Krishna consciousness society was based on renunciation, said Prabhupada, and therefore all sincere devotees were as good as sannyasis. The actual dress didn't matter, whether white or saffron. And the footnote says, grihastha men traditionally wear white, brahmacharis and sannyasis wear saffron. Although an ideal grihastha should eventually come to the stage of formal sannyas. He said that all his disciples should become gurus and each make thousands of disciples, just as he had, thus spreading Krishna consciousness everywhere. Discuss in the GBC, he said, and make a decision. Question and put to vote. But if you make brahmachari party, grihastha party, sannyasi party, it will be finished. Everything should be done very openly. We have to work for Krishna. Why this pss, pss whispering? It's not very good. The next morning, while Srila Prabhupada was on his walk around the Mayapur fields, the GBC Vice Chairman, Madhudvisa Swami, asked for guidance in preparation for the GBC meeting that day. Madhudvisa: the subjects that we are going to be discussing today in the GBC meeting are about the role of sannyasis and brahmacharis and grihasthas in ISKCON. In the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, in one of your purports, you say that a sannyasi should never discourage a young man from getting married. But on the other hand, we understand that a sannyasi should encourage young men to remain brahmachari. So it seems to me like there's some kind of contradiction. Prabhupada: according to time and circumstance, just like Krishna says, niyatang kuru karma tvam, always be engaged in your prescribed work. And at last he says, sarva dharman parityaja mam ekam sharanam vraja. Footnote: give up all prescribed duty, dharma, and surrender to me. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verse 66. Back to the text. So now you adjust. That is not a contradiction. It is just suitable to the time and circumstance. Madhudvisa. But is there some conclusion? Prabhupada. The real aim is that you have to become the eternal servant of Krishna. Either you go through karma or jnana or yoga, it doesn't matter. The ultimate aim is how to reach Krishna. Arjuna achieved the favor of Krishna by fighting and killing. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada said no more. He had created the GBC to deal with just such problems, and he had instructed his GBC men personally in letters and in his books. Now they would have to apply those instructions according to time and place. The GBC met, discussed all day, and by evening had a list of resolutions pertaining to the divisions of ashram in ISKCON. Husbandless women and children could not live in ISKCON temples. Husband and wife could not live in ISKCON temples, even if separately. Before entering marriage, devotees should have a means of supporting themselves and not expect to live off ISKCON. Upon getting married, a householder would be financially responsible for his wife until such time as he took sannyas. Reading the resolutions to Prabhupada in his room usually evoked little verbal response from him. His practice was generally to nod in approval or occasionally to comment. But when he heard the resolution that husbandless women and children could not stay in the temples, he uttered a thoughtful, Then he said, "As for me, my only concern is that they shall not waste their valuable human life." He was speaking not in the tone of the official head of the society who could veto resolutions, but in a very personal, humble way, as a pure devotee. After so much struggle, he said, "They have got this human form, and I do not want that they should miss the opportunity. As for me, I cannot discriminate. Man, woman, child, rich, poor, educated, or foolish. Let them all come, and let them take Krishna consciousness, so that they will not waste their human life." Although the GBC members usually had plenty to say, after these remarks from Prabhupada, they remained silent. Finally, Tamal Krishna Goswami, the elected GBC chairman for the year, spoke. "Yes, Srila Prabhupada," he said. "So we will strike that resolution." Prabhupada also disapproved the resolution that a householder would have to give financial support for his wife for the rest of his life until he took sannyas. "You each be guru," he said. "As I have 5,000 disciples or 10,000, so you have 10,000 each. In this way create branches and branches of the Chaitanya tree. But you have to be spiritually strong. This means chanting your rounds and following the 4 rules. It is not an artificial show. It is not a material thing. Chant and follow the 4 rules and pray to Krishna in helplessness. We have to have enthusiasm. If we lose our enthusiasm, everything will become slack. In old age, I came out from Vrindavan. I had no money, nothing. But I thought, let me try." Bhagavan spoke out spontaneously. "You're still enthusiastic, Srila Prabhupada?" "Yes," Prabhupada smiled. "I am enthusiastic. I don't think I am an old man." "Sometimes we think we are old," said Bhagavan. "No one is old," said Prabhupada. "Nahan yate hanyamane sharire." Footnote: the soul is not destroyed with the destruction of the body. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 20. Back to the quote. "Sometimes in old age one is pushed down, but I am enthusiastic." Prabhupada said he was pleased at most of the resolutions because they indicated that a strong GBC was now ready to relieve him so he could concentrate on his translation work. He said that the devotees would have to strictly follow for the entire year what the GBC had agreed on. There should be no changes unless he approved, and at the next annual meeting, they could make any changes necessary. The GBC chairman then called for a vote on an unresolved topic from the day's meeting. The topic had been discussed, but since it had not been approved, the chairman called for a vote. Everyone voted yes by raising their right hand. Then Srila Prabhupada raised his hand also. His disciples immediately laughed at this endearing gesture. Yes, Prabhupada said, I am simply following the GBC. Whatever you say, I have to follow. When the temple presidents heard about the GBC resolutions, many objected. They knew Prabhupada had approved them, but they thought that the actual spirit and interpretation some of the sannyasis might give to the resolutions would cause a split in the society. Many of the temple presidents, being grihastas, felt discriminated against. They wanted a chance to present their side. Prabhupada knew of the president's discontent, and he brought up the subject on his next morning walk. Surrounded by sannyasis, GBC men, temple presidents, and others, he brought out the issues, attempting to bring his spiritual family into harmony. I have heard, he said, that too much stricture on the grihastas may cause some disturbance, Yes, admitted Madhudvisa. So, said Prabhupada, I think the grihastas themselves should form a small committee and define what they will do, instead of forcing something on them, because in this age nobody can follow strictly all the strictures of the Shastras. Tamal Krishna objected to the idea of grihastas revising the GBC resolutions. In none of our resolutions, he argued, do we say anything about how the grihastas should live. The resolutions simply say how our society should be run. It doesn't say how grihastas should live. And on points of objection, Prabhupada has already corrected us. I think it may be further decided, Prabhupada continued. Make a small committee of 3 or 4 grihastas, then you define how you live. Changing the subject, Prabhupada asked when the pandal was going to be built. Today, 350 devotees were expected to arrive from the west. The pandal stage was supposed to have been erected, and festivities, including theater, would begin in the evening, but the devotees, irrepressibly absorbed in the grihasta sannyasi issue, could not refrain from pursuing it further. That is the distinction between the enjoying spirit and the renouncing spirit? Asked Pushta Krishna Swami, returning to the theme. Prabhupada asked. Although the question was pointed, he remained poised and detached from their party divisions. His idea of what to do was definite, but his method of teaching it was careful and gradual. He already knew well the difficult task of satisfying divergent views among the strong-minded disciples. For years, he had been making the ultimate decisions and teaching his disciples how to go forward in a united way. Once again, an issue was building that only he could solve, if they would listen. Pushta Krishna, for example, as we have been discussing, there are different tendencies between the brahmacharis and the grihastas. The attitude of the brahmacharis is toward renunciation. If a brahmachari gives up his brahmachari life to become a grihasta, that means he is more inclined to the enjoying spirit, at least to some extent. So how to deal with this situation? Prabhupada, if you want to enjoy, who can stop you? Tamal Krishna, but we cannot support it. We cannot support his enjoyment, that he should take on himself. Prabhupada, according to different positions and attitudes, the 4 ashrams are there: brahmachari, grihasta, vanaprastha, sannyas. This means that everyone is not on the equal platform. There are different platforms, but the whole idea is how to give up the propensity of enjoyment. That is wanted. Pushta Krishna, We find in the Srimad Bhagavatam that Shukadev Goswami would approach the householders in the morning just so long as to give them a little bit of spiritual knowledge, and he would accept the offering of some milk. So, the sannyasis and renunciants, generally, they wouldn't very much relish the association of householders because of this enjoying spirit and the association that it entails. So we are finding also within our society that those who are inclined to remaining celibate, they are finding the association of persons even within our movement who have this enjoying spirit to be somewhat detrimental to their own spiritual life. Prabhupada, then what is your proposal? You should drive them away? Madhudvisa, unless there is association, then they will never become purified. Tamal Krishna, no, that is not the problem, because everyone comes together for association. They come together in the temple for kirtan, for lectures, for prasadam. These things are common activities. There's no question that we should not have common activities between all the ashrams, but for living, there must be separate arrangement. Prabhupada. Now, even in the temple, you are complaining that a husband and wife are talking. Prabhupada seemed almost coy in the way he gradually led and manipulated the issue. He was also hearing more clearly the minds and hearts of his divided disciples. Tamal Krishna. Yes, they are not talking Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada. That you will find everywhere. Bhagavat. There's a complaint that sometimes is made that there's too much aversion on the part of the brahmacharis. But isn't that a quality of a brahmachari, that he should have a healthy contempt for sense gratification? Prabhupada. I do not follow. The devotees crowded around as closely as possible. This was an important point. Pushta Krishna. He's saying that sometimes the brahmacharis and even the sannyasis may have a strong aversion to association with women and householder life. But sometimes the grihastas will criticize the sannyasis and brahmacharis and say, this is fanaticism. The grihastas say that this is just as bad as the enjoying spirit, because a sannyasi is meditating on the same thing, except that he's averse to it. So, Bhagavat Das's question is it better to be neutral or to be averse? Prabhupada. These are all fanaticism. Real unity is in advancing Krishna consciousness. Kalo nastyeva nastyeva. In the Kali Yuga you cannot strictly follow. Neither I can strictly follow. If I criticize you, if you criticize me, then we go far away from our real life in Krishna consciousness. Pushta Krishna. So, is it correct to say that if we are not Krishna conscious, then if it's not the grihasta problem, it would be some other problem? Prabhupada. Yes. We should always remember that either grihasta or brahmachari or sannyasi, nobody can strictly follow all the rules and regulations. In the Kali Yuga, it is not possible. If I simply find fault with you, and if you find fault with me, then it will be factional, and our real business will be hampered. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has recommended that Harinam, chanting Hare Krishna mantra, should be very rigidly performed, which is common for everyone, grihasta, vanaprastha, and sannyas. They should always chant Hare Krishna mantra. Then everything will be adjusted. Otherwise, it is impossible to advance. We shall be complicated with the details only. This is called niyamagraha. I think I have explained it. Madhudvisa. Yes, in the Nectar of Instruction. Prabhupada. Niyamagraha is not good. Niyama means regulative principles, and agraha means not to accept. Agraha means the opposite. Too eager to accept the regulative principles. Agraha means the opposite. Too eager to accept the regulative principles, but no advancement spiritually. Both of them are called niyamagraha. So the basic principle is that niyamagraha is not recommended. If we advance in Krishna consciousness by the simple method of chanting 24 hours, kirtaniya sada hari, then things will be automatically adjusted. You cannot find in Kali Yuga that everything is being done very correctly to the point. That is very difficult. Just like our poet Allen Ginsberg, he was always accusing me. Swamiji, you're very conservative and strict. Actually, I told him, I'm never strict. Neither I am conservative. If I become conservative, then I cannot live here for a moment. So I'm not at all conservative. I was living with one boy, Carl Jurgens. I was cooking, and I saw in the refrigerator some pieces of meat for his cat. So, still I kept my food in that refrigerator. What could be done? They had been talking for over an hour, and Prabhupada had given definitive instructions, but it was not over yet. It was clear, however, who was in control. Later that morning, 350 devotees approached the precincts of Mayapur in a caravan of buses from the Calcutta airport. For most of the arriving devotees, this would be their first visit to Mayapur, and their excitement countered the fatigue of the long journey from the west. Free of worldly concerns, they had come to India to visit Srila Mayapur and to see Srila Prabhupada again. After 3 hours on the road, the buses had entered Mayapur, and soon the devotees were seeing the Gaudiya Mat temples, the Srivas Angana, the Samadhi of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and the birth site of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all appearing one after the other as the buses, horns blaring almost incessantly, veered around the winding turns of Bhaktisiddhanta Road. Villagers on foot and in rickshaws, buffalo, goats, and cows moved hurriedly aside. Local residents looked up with curiosity and surprise at the sight of hundreds of Western bhaktas arriving to celebrate Gaur Purnima. Then the arriving devotees saw, on the flat Mayapur landscape, the pinkish hue and beautiful features of ISKCON's Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir, the place Srila Prabhupada had prepared for them, the home of which they had heard so much. As the buses arrived at the gate to the ISKCON property, the devotees cheered to see the new domes and fields of flowers, and their eagerness to see Srila Prabhupada increased. There would be formalities of registering and receiving a room, a few complications in locating and settling in, but nothing major. They were home now among fellow devotees. Soon they would be able to bathe in the Ganges and to hear the schedule for parikrams to the holy places. Some devotees rested, while others met with friends from various places in the world. They shared the latest news and received experienced advice about the Ganges swift current and about avoiding dysentery and mosquitoes. By early evening, they had all moved into their rooms and taken prasadam. The Shahnai musicians, in a small room above the entrance gate, began playing an evening raga. The sky darkened, and devotees began gathering in the brightly lit temple room for a gigantic kirtan. These devotees had been working very hard in various cities throughout the world, and coming to Mayapur was like a reward for their austerities and patient service. Now they could relax and enjoy spiritual life with no responsibilities other than to worship the deities, to see and hear Srila Prabhupada, to chant Hare Krishna, and to simply be Krishna conscious in the eternal abode of Lord Chaitanya. When Prabhupada heard that now almost 600 devotees were gathered in his Mayapur place of worship, he was very pleased. He inquired whether the prasadam and accommodations were sufficient and whether there would be a full schedule of engagements for everyone. Otherwise, he said, if the devotees remained idle, they would get sick or would gossip. He said everyone should simply chant Hare Krishna, go on parikram, and engage in Krishna Katha. Some of the new arrivals, especially temple presidents, were drawn into the schism regarding grihastas and sannyasis. Now that all the temple presidents were together, they called for a special meeting, rallying together in their discontent. They disliked the resolutions restricting the place of grihastas in ISKCON, and as they spoke and compared opinions, they found a particular focus for their grievances. Most of the objections were coming from the North American temple presidents and were aimed at the Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party led by Tamal Krishna Goswami. The conflict had been building for at least a year, ever since Tamal Krishna had formed the Radha Damodar party. Within that year, the party had grown to about 150 men traveling all over North America and distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. Prabhupada had praised the party, which was responsible for 30 to 40% of the total remittances to the American BBT. Men on the Radha Damodar party lived with spiritually advanced sannyasis. They developed traits of austerity and detachment and had an enthusiasm for remaining celibate without a need for marriage. The Radha Damodar party broke all records for book distribution and outdid all other zones and temples. An elite army of Sankirtan soldiers, they were the recognized world leaders of book distribution. More than 80 members of the party had arrived at the Mayapur festival, and they were given a special reserved section in the best building for their residence. But in their zealousness for renunciation and Sankirtan leadership, some of the Radha Damodar brahmacharis had developed a condescending attitude toward temple life and householders. This materialistic conception had reached the point where some men were judging the worth of a devotee on the basis of whether he wore white cloth as a grihasta or saffron as a sannyasi or brahmachari. Anyone in white could not be a spiritually advanced devotee. At least this was the misconception that the temple presidents felt had developed among some of the more immature members of the Radha Damodar party. The greatest grievance, however, was more practical than philosophical. The presidents claimed that the Radha Damodar party was stealing men from the temples. The temple presidents compared stories and cited numerous instances to prove that men had been lured from their services in the temples to join the Radha Damodar party. The philosophy that sannyasis were superior to grihastas, the president said, was being used in an opportunistic way to convince men, the very best brahmacharis, to give up their posts in Prabhupada's temple and join the Radha Damodar group. This often caused serious difficulties. The temple presidents considered the preaching of the Radha Damodar party to be unbalanced and selfishly motivated. So acute had the disagreement grown that some temples had forbidden the Radha Damodar party to visit, and some had banned Radha Damodar sannyasis from lecturing to the devotees. The Radha Damodar men, however, saw these restrictions as further proof of the householders' small-mindedness and attachment. Srila Prabhupada bided his time on the volatile issue and went about his duties, receiving guests and supervising the management of the Mayapur temple and the festival. He was lecturing daily in the temple and satisfying everyone. To his servants and secretaries, however, he revealed that the schism was causing him anxiety. That the temple presidents were angry disturbed him. One afternoon, he could not even take his nap because of worry. "This is a very serious thing," he said to Hari Shori during the massage. "This difference of sannyas and grihasta, everything will be spoiled." Hari Shori compared the present schism to the schism that had destroyed the Gaudiya Math. Another time, when sitting in his room, Prabhupada picked up a decorative bookmark a brahmacharini had made for him. "Such nice service," he said. "How can it be refused? I have never stopped them from serving simply because they are women." Rameshwar came to Prabhupada's room and showed him some of the recent BBT publications. They discussed their business, turning at last to the sannyasi grihasta issue. As Rameshwar began to offer his opinion, Prabhupada asked that other available sannyasis and GBC men come in for the discussion. Rameshwar was championing the temple's cause, relating some of the financial and practical problems the temples were experiencing due to losing men to the Radha Damodar party. When men left, then book distribution declined in those temples. In the face of the heavy propaganda for joining the traveling bus parties, how could the loyal temple devotees remain satisfied collecting money mostly for maintaining the temples without being able to afford to distribute books? The temple devotees also wanted to have the ecstasy of book distribution, but that was becoming increasingly difficult due to the crippling tactics of the traveling bus parties. Rameshwar asked Srila Prabhupada to clarify the philosophical misconception that grihastas were not advanced enough to manage the brahmacharis. Prabhupada mentioned the sannyasi Chota Haridas, whom Lord Chaitanya had rejected for only slight association with a woman. Yet, Lord Chaitanya had embraced a grihasta, Shivananda Sen, on learning that Shivananda Sena's wife was pregnant. Prabhupada said that although Lord Chaitanya's relationship with his sannyasis was different than his relationship with his grihastas, both were transcendental. The grihastas were encouraged to perform family duties and raise Krishna-conscious children. Addressing the sannyasis present, Prabhupada said that for them to be dwelling so much on the activities of the householders was inappropriate. It meant that the sannyasis were thinking about sex more than the householders were. If the sannyasis were thinking all day long about married life, they would become contaminated. Prabhupada then told a story to illustrate his point. Once, two Brahmins were about to cross a river when a lady appeared in need of assistance in crossing. So one of the Brahmins offered to carry her on his back. The other Brahmin was shocked, but refrained from saying anything. After crossing the river, the lady thanked them very much and went her way. The two Brahmins continued walking, but for hours the other Brahmin continued to talk about the incident. "You let that woman climb on your back and touch your body," he said, and he continued talking. Finally, the other Brahmin corrected him. "I carried her on my back for 10 minutes, but you've been carrying her on your mind for 3 hours. The temple presidents selected Jayadvaita, a brahmachari expert in the Krishna consciousness philosophy, to present their case before Srila Prabhupada. Some of the GBC members holding the same views also went, and since much of the opposition was against the Radha Damodar party, Tamal Krishna Goswami also came to defend his party. The many members of the Radha Damodar party who had come to Mayapur looking for spiritual bliss after a year of demanding Sankirtan service were hearing themselves criticized and wanted to retaliate. The jubilant spiritual atmosphere of the festival was threatened by a political rift. Jayadvaita explained to Prabhupada that the temple presidents felt the propaganda that grihastas were incompetent to lead brahmacharis was actually just a device. The real issue was men and money. By telling the temple brahmacharis not to work under grihastas, the Radha Damodar sannyasis were able to lure the men from their authorized services in the temples. Tamal Krishna agreed that if such false ideas were circulating, then they should be stopped. But he maintained that his party was not actually perpetrating such a philosophy. Accusations passed back and forth before Srila Prabhupada, who then delivered his opinion. The standard should not be discrimination between grihasta and sannyasi. We should simply see according to the advancement in Krishna consciousness. Ye Krishna Tattva Veta Se Guru Hai. Footnote. Regardless of social status, anyone who knows the science of Krishna consciousness is qualified to become a spiritual master. Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, Chapter 8, verse 128. This principle should be followed by his advancement in Krishna consciousness. Palena Parichiyate. Judge by the results, not by the dress. We can see his position. By making party politics, everything will be finished. Prabhupada said that a brahmachari generally assisted a sannyasi, and a sannyasi was a preacher. The grihasta is also the appropriate man to take care of the temple. If a brahmachari wanted to travel with a sannyasi, therefore, that was all right. But if he has a responsibility, said Prabhupada, he must stay. The real point, he said, was that the devotees should all think of themselves as servants of the 6 Goswamis. The whole problem before them was caused by forgetting we are servants of Krishna. It is not that a particular service is especially for a grihasta or a sannyasi, Prabhupada continued. He must be Krishnadas. A servant's service is judged by the results. Why this party and that party? Ye Krishna Tattva Vita Se Guru Hai. Bhakti Vinod was a grihasta. Bhakti Siddhanta was a sannyasi. Is one better than the other? No. So there should not be threatening. We are now worldwide organization. Prabhupada repeatedly quoted the verse, Kiba Vipra Kiba Nyasi Shudra Kene Nai Ye Krishna Tattva Veta Se Guru Hai. Thus, dispelling the contention that ashram determines the quality of a devotee. Whoever knows the science of Krishna, whoever is fully engaged in the service of Krishna, Prabhupada stressed that person is a pure devotee. A sannyasi, Prabhupada said, could preach, but he could also manage. A grihasta could manage, but could also preach. Although Prabhupada had already brought up these points, now he was settling the issue completely. This discrimination, he said, must stop. It was not Krishna conscious, and the GBC should remove all resolutions discriminating against grihastas. Prabhupada emphasized that the real standard was to be Krishna Das, the servant of Krishna. In that surrendered mood, a devotee should be expert and willing to do whatever service was needed. He gave the example that some 50 years ago, when he had been the manager of Bose's laboratory in Calcutta, the workers had gone on strike. To the remaining workers he had said, "Come on, let's pack." They had accepted the menial labor, and the strike had been ended. Similarly, whatever capacity of service was required, a devotee should do it. We must be very stubborn. Servant of Krishna, Prabhupada said. Prabhupada pointed out that he was probably the first bona fide sannyasi to arrange for his disciples' marriages. Certainly he did not encourage disobeying the regulative principles. He said, but the real business was Krishna's service. If that included arranging for marriages, then it should be done. But generally, the division is that the sannyasi is fully engaged in preaching, he said, and the sannyasi's preaching should not be checked. Whoever is in charge of something, let him remain. If there is some discrepancy, try to correct it. In every rumor, there is a grain of truth. Prabhupada was not only defining and settling the immediate quarrels, but he was elevating all the devotees to the level of dedicated and inspired Krishna consciousness. He was not siding with one party or watering down the philosophy to make peace. He was appealing to the disciples' intelligence. And more than that, he was entering their hearts and making them satisfied and truly desirous of working with one another. When Srila Prabhupada stopped speaking, he asked for a response. Jayadvaita said he thought the presidents would be completely satisfied with Prabhupada's decisions. Tamal Krishna said that the GBC would also be satisfied, and that everyone, by Prabhupada's grace, could now go forward with the right understanding. The devotees then left Prabhupada's room in a joyful mood, prepared to join the others and take part in an uplifting, non-political Gaur Purnima festival. The next morning, Prabhupada went for his walk on the roof of the Mayapur building. As soon as he began circumambulating on the roof, at least 24 devotees, mostly temple presidents and sannyasis, joined him. The temple presidents felt victorious. Their positions were vindicated, and the misunderstandings of the philosophy had been straightened out. Now everything was proper. The whole affair had increased the devotees' faith in Prabhupada and in the wisdom of following his order without false prestige. As they walked, Panchadravida Swami, in a mood of humorous relief to the tension of the past days, began questioning Prabhupada in an odd way. "Srila Prabhupada," he said, "there is one thing I don't understand. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that story of Sakshi Gopal, the deity who came to witness for the young Brahmin. So the young man was serving the old Brahmin, and then the old Brahmin promised the hand of his daughter in marriage, and then the deity came to bear witness. So, if he was such a pure devotee, why did he call the deity to come such a great distance just so he could become married? Why didn't he want to remain single? And why did he make the deity come just for his marriage?" It was not only the words, but the way Panchadravida said them, jesting in the role of an overly critical sannyasi. And Prabhupada immediately entered the joking spirit. "We are not against marriage. We are against illicit sex. But because no woman would have you, now you are saying that no one should marry. Just see the psychology here." The devotees began to laugh wildly. "This is the sour grapes philosophy," says Srila Prabhupada. "Because no woman will have you, nobody wants you. Therefore, you are feeling this rejection and thinking that nobody should get married." On the morning of Gaur Purnima, the appearance day of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Srila Prabhupada lectured on a Bhagavatam verse spoken by Prahlad Maharaj to Lord Nrsimhadev. The verse, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 9, verse 38, indirectly refers to Srila Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance. Quote, In this way, my Lord, you have appeared in different incarnations, as human beings, as animals, as a great saintly person, as demigods, and as a fish and a tortoise. In this way, you maintain the whole creation in different planetary systems and kill the demoniac principles in every age. My Lord, therefore protect the principles of religion. In the age of Kali, you do not assert yourself as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, you are known as Tri Yuga, or the Lord who appears in 3 yugas, unquote. Seated comfortably on his Vyasa-san, Srila Prabhupada looked out over his reading spectacles at the long hall full of seated disciples. 2 devotees fanned him with big chamara whisks. The many glass chandeliers sparkled. At the opposite end of the hall stood the forms of Radha Madhava and Lord Chaitanya. So, here is a very specific statement about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, said Prabhupada. He is Avatar. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the same Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he is Chana. Chana means covered, not directly, because he has appearance as a devotee. Srila Prabhupada explained why the Supreme Lord appeared in Kali Yuga as a devotee. When Lord Krishna appeared, he ordered everyone to surrender to me, but they took it, who is this person asking like that? What right does he have? Why shall I give up? But God himself, the Supreme Being, he must order. That is God. But we think otherwise. Who is this man? Why is he ordering? Why shall I give up? The whole process of Krishna consciousness is submission, surrender to Krishna, Srila Prabhupada explained. But the way to surrender to Krishna is to submit to his devotee, his representative. So, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared this day for giving mercy to the fallen souls who are so foolish they cannot take to Krishna consciousness. He is personally teaching them. That is this kirtan. Later that morning, Prabhupada came down to the temple room again, this time to perform initiations. 15 devotees were receiving Brahminical initiation, 25 were receiving first initiation, and 7 men were receiving sannyas. Again, Srila Prabhupada quoted the verse that had become a theme for the festival. Kiba vipra kiba nyasi, shudra kene noi. Either he is a grihasta or a sannyasi, it doesn't matter. He must become a guru. How? Ye Krishna Tattvaveta, one who knows the principles of Krishna consciousness, one who understands Krishna. He can become a guru. Guru is the post given to the sannyasi and to the Brahmins. Without becoming a Brahmanas, nobody can become a sannyasi. And the sannyasi is supposed to be the guru of both all the ashrams and all the varnas. So, for preaching work, we require so many sannyasis. People are suffering all over the world for the want of Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada cautioned the young men to live as very strict sannyasis. He also stressed that all his disciples should be training to become qualified as gurus. He quoted, Yare dekha tare kaha, Krishna upadesh. Anywhere, either you are in this district or that. District, it doesn't matter. Either you are at home or outside home. It doesn't matter. You become a guru, everyone. How shall I become guru? I have no qualification. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that you don't require any qualification. You simply require one qualification, that you repeat the instruction of Bhagavad Gita. That's all. Yare dekha tare kaha Krishna upadesh. You become a guru. Don't adulterate Krishna upadesh like a rascal or nonsense. Present it as it is, Bhagavad Gita. Then you can become a guru. You can become a guru in your family. You can become a guru in your society, your nation, wherever you are. And if it is possible, you go outside and preach this mission of Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, our movement's name is Krishna consciousness. Whatever Krishna says, you accept and preach. You become guru. On Gaur Purnima day, everyone fasted until moonrise, and most of the devotees walked down to the Ganges to bathe. Jayapataka Swami told them that, according to Shastra, whoever bathed in the Ganges at Mayapur during Gaur Purnima would become liberated from birth and death. In the early evening, pilgrims began arriving in great numbers. From all over West Bengal, people yearly visited the temples in Mayapur, especially the birth site of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and, more recently, ISKCON's Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir. In Calcutta, people had seen the billboards advertising the ISKCON Gaur Purnima festival, and by word of mouth, tens of thousands of villagers had heard about the longest building in West Bengal and the golden deity of Radha Madhava. Devotees greeted the guests with prasadam and sold copies of Gitar Gan, Srila Prabhupada's Bengali versification of Bhagavad Gita. By nighttime, long streams of people were flowing in and out of the front gates. The crowds raised a cloud of dust, and the air filled with sounds of rickshaw bells, women singing, friends talking, and the amplified kirtan emanating from the temple. Most of the visitors walked through the temple, visited the photo exhibit, and then stayed for a while, watching the kirtan or the theater performance at the outdoor pandal stage. Although the number of visitors approached 100,000, the scene remained peaceful, as people moved along without pushing or hurrying, observing the customary respect of visiting a holy place. Dhruvanath. The most ecstatic highlight of the festival was when, after greeting the deities in the morning, Srila Prabhupada would circumambulate the temple. There was a bell on either side of the deity room, and as we circumambulated and Prabhupada came to those bells, a devotee would hand him the rope. As the devotees chanted and danced ecstatically, Prabhupada would pull the bell in time to the kirtan, and at the same time he would raise his left hand to indicate that devotees should chant and dance more and more. Anaka Dundubi. Srila Prabhupada would sit on the veranda looking over all of Mayapur. I saw him watching some boys herding their cows. He was absorbed in watching the whole place. Then someone gave him a little pair of binoculars, and he would look out across Mayapur, with one finger up in the air. He looked like a general. He was looking across to Bhaktivinoda Thakur's house, and then he spotted the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. He looked at it very closely, and then he said, "Almost no men, they have no men." Satsvarup Das Goswami. One day, Prabhupada called in the GBC members. It was in the afternoon, and we could see he was feeling very blissful. He was hearing the kirtan in the temple. He said everyone should come to Mayapur and chant 24 hours a day. He said, "There's so much room here. The morning class is so nice." Prahlad Maharaja's instruction 1,000,000 years ago, a 5-year-old boy was speaking. The chanting, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, is the only solace. It is nothing material, the chanting. A Jamil called the name of Narayana and was saved. Prabhupada said that batches of devotees should come to Mayapur so that there should always be 500 men present. Then a devotee said, "In America they are trying to chant more, 12 hours a day, trying to get a 24-hour kirtan schedule." "Yes, everywhere," Srila Prabhupada said. "This chanting should go on. Instead of meetings, resolutions, dissolutions, revolutions, and then no solutions, there should be chanting." Gopa Vrindapala. I had guard duty, and Prabhupada would get up around 12 midnight or 1 o'clock. He would be upstairs, and I would be 1 floor below. He was chanting a lot, pacing back and forth on the balcony. I couldn't see him, but I could see his shaven head silhouetted. He was walking about 10 steps one way and then 10 steps the other way. I had a 3-hour watch, and I sat there, chanting my japa and watching Prabhupada's head go back and forth. Sometimes I could hear when his chanting was louder. I was reminded of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati because Srila Prabhupada described many times the balcony where Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati paced back and forth, envisioning and considering how to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. So, Prabhupada was also pacing and thinking how to spread Krishna consciousness. Anaka Dundubi. In Prabhupada's room on the wall, there was a beautiful sandalwood carving of Radha and Krishna, just like on the Krishna book cover, with Radha and Krishna standing. Radharani with her arm around Krishna holding his flute, and Krishna holding his cape around her. When there weren't any guests for darshan, Prabhupada would just sit and look at that picture. He loved it very much. When I would take his garland up to him, he would wear it during darshan for about an hour and a half. Then after darshan, he would get up and go to the bathroom after first taking the garland off. Then he would come back and give the garland to Radha and Krishna. A number of times I gave him garlands made of very fragrant little white flowers that Jananivas would give me. Prabhupada used to take that garland and put it on Radha Krishna in such a beautiful way. It was the perfection of deity worship, the way he put that little garland there. Jananivas. Just before Prabhupada left, I came up and I asked him, "Frankincense, Srila Prabhupada?" There was no one else in the room at the time, and he was just chanting japa sitting in his room. I started to fill up the room with smoke from the frankincense. Smoke was coming out everywhere, and Prabhupada kept the windows closed. He looked up and said, "This creates such an atmosphere of spiritual understanding. This is so nice, so nice." Then he started chanting again. Pushta Krishna. When Prabhupada was finally finished conducting the Mayapur festival, I asked him if he was tired. Prabhupada said, "What, tired? So many people are coming and hearing about Krishna. When preaching, you feel refreshed."